We now move to the final amendment lodged by Deputy Jeune. Deputy Jeune, you have an amendment to your amendment. Do you wish to propose it as amended?
Yes, please, sir.
Members content so to do? Yes, the Deputy Secretary will read the amendment as amended.
Article 38. 1. After paragraph 1, insert 2. For paragraph 1, there is some substituted. 1. After a nomination form for the office of Senator has been completed with the information and declarations required by Article 17D, the form must be subscribed by A. One proposer and B. 9 seconders consisting of one representative of each of the deputies' constituencies specified in column-headed constituencies in the table in Schedule 1 to the States of Jersey Law 2005. 1A. After a nomination form for the office of deputy or comitab has been completed with the information and declarations required by Article 17D, the form must be subscribed... Oh, sorry, am I reading that again? So it must be subscribed by one proposer and 9 seconders. 2, renumber the subsequent paragraphs accordingly. 3, in paragraph 3, renumbered as paragraph 4. After the inserted paragraph 3, insert 4. The person seconding a nomination for the office of Senator represents a deputy's constituency if the person's name is included in the electoral register for an electoral district that is or is within the constituency.
Deputy Jeune.
Thank you, sir. We've debated a lot, some would say too much, about the reintroduction of senators and about what it means to hold an island-wide mandate. My amendment today is simple. It's about strengthening that principle in a way that is fair, balanced and practical. And I thank the Assembly for allowing me to shorten the lodging period from my amendment to my amendment. Let me start with why we have proposers and seconders at all. They serve an important purpose: to ensure that anyone who wants to stand for office has a basic level of support from the community before appearing on the ballot paper. By signing a nomination, they are publicly confirming not only that the candidate is suitable, but that they support their manifesto, platform, and values. It's a threshold that protects the integrity of the process. So the question is this: if senators are meant to represent the whole of Jersey, shouldn't their nomination reflect that wider responsibility? Right now, the law requires the same number of supporters for senators as for deputies, 1 proposer and 9 seconders. But for deputies, those supporters must come from their own constituency, whether that's 1, 2 or 3 parishes. For senators, it could all come from a single parish. That is the same as a comitab, even though the expectations of the role are completely different. Deputies, by contrast, must demonstrate support from their own constituency, whether that covers 1, 2 or 3 parishes. That doesn't feel right, given the island-wide nature of the role. My amendment asks candidates for senator to show that support in a way that is simple and proportionate. 1 proposer from anywhere in Jersey, and 9 seconders, 1 from each of the 9 deputy constituencies. That's it. 10 supporters in total, exactly the same number required as now, but with one important difference: a senatorial candidate must demonstrate genuine island-wide support before their name appears on the ballot paper. Why does this matter? First, it reinforces the island-wide mandate. It sets the expectation from the start that if you want to be a senator, you need to show support across both urban and rural communities, from east to west, from St Helier to St Warren. Second, it promotes genuine engagement. It requires candidates to step outside their own circles, to listen and connect with islanders from every constituency. It means they won't just turn up at hustings claiming to speak for the whole island. They will have started by doing it. Third, it builds trust. Islanders deserve to know that those who seek to represent them at the highest level have already demonstrated broad support. That is good for transparency, fairness and confidence in our process. And fourth, it promotes fairness. Using the 9 constituencies ensures every part of Jersey is recognised equally in the process. This proposal avoids the imbalance that comes with relying solely on the parish system. Parishes differ hugely in size and influence. But in developing this proposal, I spent a great deal of time working through what I believe to be the fairest formula. And I was grateful to discuss my first amendment with a number of fellow states members and realised that what was needed was simplicity. That is why I amended my amendment to make sure it is right. In short, this formula reduces the risk of any one community dominating a candidate's priorities. Instead, it encourages senators to reach out across the senator candidates to reach out across the island, engage with islanders from a wide range of social and economic backgrounds. This, I believe, is the fairest and most democratic way of ensuring that candidates for senator genuinely demonstrate support across Jersey. So this is not a barrier to entry. It is not designed to shut people out. Quite the opposite. It is a test of readiness. If someone cannot find 10 people across Jersey willing to support their nomination, how can they credibly stand to represent the whole island? I urge members to support this amendment. It is simple, fair, and strengthens the integrity of the senatorial mandate for the benefit of the whole island. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the amendment seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Chair of PPC.
Thank you, sir. The amended version of this amendment was only lodged on Thursday, and so the committee has been unable to provide a comment. The committee was unable to agree a consensus view on the original proposition. The PPC did have a meeting on Monday morning, during which this amendment to the amendment was discussed. The Privilege and Procedures Committee were divided as to whether to support this adjustment, and therefore, as Chair, I am unable to provide direction from the committee. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Does anyone wish to speak on this amendment? Deputy Rob Ward.
So it's a question really. When we talk about, this is probably in the election law, I just don't know it well enough, my fault, is when we talk about where somebody is in that parish, is that a registered address to live and paying rates within that parish? Is it a business? Well, if somebody owns property in more than one parish, and I just want to make clear of that because, and what if they move? And is it at the point of the signature for the nomination, or is it the point of their election? So if they move in between, and I only call this out because I've actually seen this situation arise in other jurisdictions. Observation, it caused a lot of legal wranglings later on. So just for clarity for everybody, I don't have a massive problem with this, but I also say that one person in each constituency does not mean you have a full oversight of the island-wide views, or you can say that you represent the whole island. I personally think the only way we can do that is by having properly functioning party politics with members from across the island and genuine representation and consultation. But of course, sir, I would say that, wouldn't I? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Reneth.
Thank you, sir. Very briefly, I think there's an interesting point about this because it does raise questions about what the position of senator is. It's talked about as an island-wide mandate. Actually, of course, that's not strictly, technically, what it is, because it is entirely possible to be elected as a senator with votes from just one parish. That would be the largest parish. And actually, you wouldn't need any votes from the rest of the island. And you know, that's actually valid, I think. That's actually valid. But I think that's probably not what most people think of when they think of the senator elections. They do want to have some sense that it reflects a wider mandate. And this addresses that. Deputy Rob Ward is correct to say that it doesn't really indicate a depth of support, does it? It's one person there. But you have to find one person, you have to find a number of names anyway. And this, therefore, does at least force you to look a little wider than where you are. Now, the other big advantage for this, I think, is that it will inevitably winnow down the field. Now, normally we wouldn't think that's a good thing, but there is a risk with a 9-senator election, 3 more than at the last one. The last one, sorry, saying no, 1 more, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm thinking back to when I was on the Electoral Commission. There is a risk of, I think I am anyway, there is a risk that we will have a large number of candidates who can rely simply on getting their friends to support them, and they are not, well, I will say it because I'm tired and I can't think of a euphemism, not serious candidates. And they may be standing to increase their profile, for their business or whatever. And I think if we're going to be serious about the senator election as an election where the idea is that we have hustings, where people can address the issues that face the island, it would be good to make sure that all the candidates had to do some little job before they got there to indicate that they were serious about this. I use the word serious, I guess, in the sense that if you are serious about standing, then travelling to or contacting people from every parish in the island is not the biggest barrier. But it is a barrier in the sense that you do have to do a bit more work than if you just have to round up 9 or 10 of your friends to sign your papers. Some people might not like that. Some people may think that's a reason to vote against the amendment. I think on balance, that's a sensible, pragmatic thing that reflects the meaning of the senator role as we have been discussing it today. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor and Brillard.
Thank you, sir. And just picking up on the point that Deputy Ward made, it worries me that whilst this is a idealistic solution, once again, to elections, the reality is I fear it's overcomplicating it, and we really don't want to put any more barriers in the way of people standing, and I fear it would. Once again, the boundaries could provide an issue, and the follow-up needed for the electoral authority in the parishes to get the forms in order, I think is an added chore which they really won't be needing at the time. So on that basis, sir, I don't feel I can support the proposition.
Thank you, Conor. Does anyone else to speak on the Deputy Scott?
Thank you, sir. I note that the Speaker hasn't had the experience of standing for senator, and but she may remember the last senatorial election, and there were certain candidates who stood, and people were calling them no-hopers. And I have, on time, actually with Deputy Masick on time, talked a bit about this possible whittling down process of, whether there should be deposits for candidates, but that's been suggested that, well, that means wealthy people can, have an advantage. Do you have like long lists of names and that sort of thing? Or should you actually have qualifications? I mean, should you say, right, you can't stand for senator unless you've got a law degree and an accountancy degree, or this, that, or the other? I mean, what are you? Sorry, so sorry, David, but or this, that experience. What exactly are you trying to do here? And I think Deputy Arenev, that the logic has.
Sorry, I thought it was a point
Sorry.
of clarification.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I thought that.
Please carry on.
Oh, okay, fine. The logic is about having the idea of senators being island-wide, and therefore you've got this geographical spread. And again, I think that when it comes to the whole idea about, just representing the majority of voters, you could look at it a different way. But the deputy in her report was suggesting, well, it's not a barrier to entry, and I would say it is. And one thing that you can compare this with, it's in Guernsey, where they haven't had a problem with electoral turnout, and what I understand is that they just have a proposer and a seconder, and so why are we even asking for that many signatures in the first place? The fact is that it gets sorted out at the ballot box anyway. But what really struck me about my experience in, I think it was the last election, was my experience with candidates who stood in St Helier, in specific districts in St Helier, who contacted me asking me if I knew people in St Helier who might sign their nomination form. Because it happened because they couldn't find people who were registered. And I do sympathise. I had the same problem with somebody on my nomination form. They turned out they weren't registered, took it to the parish hall, and they said, "Oh, sorry, they're not." And it was like this person thought they won, and we won't have that problem with automatic voting. I know that should make it better, but it is that scrabbling around already when people to actually get these signatures in order to stand. I mean, it's doable, but I think in terms of all the stuff that goes on in terms of running campaigns and that sort of thing, when you're actually trying to maximise choice for electors, I don't quite, I'm not convinced that this adds much in the way of value, because you still get what you might call no hoper to achieve this, and where does it get you? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tadier.
So just to give a slightly different perspective, I probably will support this and I don't have any problem with it, but I suppose it's to address the issue of what is disparagingly some people call the no hopers at elections, and I would warn against that kind of language, and I know members have tried to be careful in their talking of non-serious candidates. I would actually think there's a distinction between candidates who put themselves forward with the best of intentions and actually some great ideas, who just for whatever reason don't have the electoral buy-in, and it's maybe that their chances of success are always hampered from the start, but it doesn't mean that what they contribute to the island-wide debate is necessarily not worth having, because it can only take one idea. And I've often heard that on the senatorial elections, is that you have somebody who actually doesn't end up being a player in politics in the long term, but they can help set the agenda. And I think back to a time actually when one candidate, it may well have been in 2008, and the person, I think, achieved the unusual feat of not getting even 1,000 votes in the election, but that was somebody who was brave enough to put some quite bold ideas on the table, one of which was a casino, which went down like a lead balloon, especially in these still Methodist country parishes, you could argue, even in 2008. And also he was advocating for same-sex marriage, and that's the first time I'd really heard it being mentioned seriously back then, and that, 2008 seems like 1,000 years ago in some ways in where we've come, and that was, no one else was willing to talk about it. He put it on the table, and it didn't get him anywhere, but he was ahead of his time, certainly when it comes to the latter, something which is now a political mainstream. And they also provide fun. I mean, let's face it, I won't mention any names to embarrass them, but I can remember a lot of the stuff that the so-called no-hopers have said in elections, where I couldn't necessarily tell you anything that I remember verbatim that was said by then Senator-elect Farnham or Senators-elect Mesek. I hope he doesn't mind me saying. I remember generally what they were talking about in terms of, but I can remember actual quotes from others who were, I think it's maybe at the St Saviour's hustings. One of the candidates was asked, "What will you do about the welfare bill?" And bringing down the welfare bill, and he said, "Well, actually, I'm currently on income support, and if you elect me, that'll be one less person on income support." And it had that reaction. He had that reaction. And he was great value. He was great value to have around the senatorial table, because you never knew what he was going to say, and he spoke from the heart, and he wasn't trying necessarily to measure everything and buy votes. So I guess the question I would ask, what would it be difficult for that person who's not necessarily a political insider to be going round every parish? He may not have a car, this person may not have a car, may not have an electric bike, which seems to be on vogue these days, which we should all probably have, to get around the island. Would that person be able to go into every parish and find someone who wants to support his election campaign? Should he be barred from standing for election because he only knows people maybe in St Saviour's, St Heliers, Trinity, and in that side of the island? I mean, that's where his support base is, because ultimately he only needs to get enough votes to get elected. It doesn't matter where they all come from. So I get that, but I also get the idea that this isn't the hardest thing in the world. I also know that from a party point of view. If you want to get elected and you come and see Reform and you're not well known, we'll sort that out for you. We'll say it's fine. We'll get your nomination paper signed. We can get somebody from every parish. We're fairly well connected. We're not universally liked, but we have connections in every of the 9 districts, and we can certainly get your nomination paper sorted. So it's fine if you're well connected in that respect. So, yeah, ultimately, I don't have a problem with that. I think there is a test that if you want to be a serious candidate and if you want to know that you've got a chance of election, have a pre-election interview process. That's what we have as a party. Candidates come to see us, probably, normally members of the party say, we'd like to stand for election. What do you think? I might need a bit of coaching. Don't worry, we'll help you. We're going to make sure that we have some basics that we want to make sure you can do the job and that we're happy with, because ultimately you're putting your name to our party and we want to make sure that you represent us and that we can do you proud as well as a party. But other members might have their own mechanisms to do that. They might have other ways to introduce these candidates to make sure they can get their 12 signatures. Just one point of clarification maybe from the mover in summing up. I seem to recall she said that it would guarantee that a candidate would have to make sure they have a cross-section of all different backgrounds, socio-economic, but of course that's not implied, is it? You could get somebody who's a devout, multi-millionaire Tory in every parish or every district of Jersey, or you could get, 9 pensioners to sign your paper who are on their uppers in every district, or you could get 9 trade unionists from every parish in Jersey. So they don't have to all be of the same socio-economic background or political inclination. But I think the last point to say is that I think most people, when they're running for any office, try and get a good cross-section on their paper, especially knowing that the nominations are going to be published. And certainly in the senatorial elections, the tradition in the olden days was make sure that every name gets you 1,000 votes. I don't know if that would necessarily translate nowadays, but that's the old wisdom that I was certainly told that people abided by when choosing their nomination, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member speak on this amendment? Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I just kind of want to go back to that 2018 senatorial election, my experience as a voter. And, I think it was there that I thought these candidates should have more signatures to collect, quite simply. And the issue, whilst we talk about choice, it's also, I talked earlier about practicality. And I do remember that at Hustings and St Lawrence, where with 17 candidates, I think I heard over the course of the 2-hour Hustings, I heard basically maybe at most 3 questions answered across the whole section of 17 candidates. And whilst I totally understand the idea of good value from a comedy perspective, I'm relatively serious when it comes to choosing my people I vote for. And yes, there may have been some laughs at the time, but there was the sense that some of these candidates really aren't going to get many votes at all. They might struggle to get 1,000 across the island. And that given that there's this comparison in the report from Deputy Jeune, which is correct, they had to get 10 signatures just the same as any deputy or connétable had to get 10 signatures, and yet their mandate is so much wider that it did seem to make sense to me then that senatorial candidates should have to have a slightly higher bar than connétable or deputies candidates. Personally, I would have perhaps made this just simpler and said, given that effectively voting districts don't count for a senatorial candidate, I'd perhaps have just broken this down as parishes and simply said X amount of votes from each parish. But I see Deputy Jeune laughing, and I get the feeling this may have been you can't do right for doing you can't get it right whichever way you go. I'm still voting for this. Deputy shouldn't worry about it. It is, and I understand that work has gone into thinking about it. It does seem slightly complex in that respect, but just the principle of a slightly higher bar in terms of getting those signatures on the form for senatorial candidates makes a lot of sense to me. And all of that thinking comes from that 2018 hustings, where I felt like we didn't learn very much about the candidates because there were so many candidates. And if there's a chance of at least making sure that candidates are perhaps, and Deputy Tuddy is right, desperately trying to choose the right words, but have greater gravity in their candidature, not necessarily in themselves, but in their candidature, I think is a good thing.
Thank you, Deputy. Connétable St Mary.
Thank you, sir. And with apologies to the Deputy Chair, I'm afraid I can't get too excited about this one way or the other. There was a time when presentation of a nomination paper was a point of theatre in the election process, and the candidate would bring it into the parish or wherever, and all names were read out, and the candidate would have made sure that he had a grocer, a farmer, a solicitor on the list to ensure a better balance, to show you that he or she was a better balanced person. I've seen papers where half the paper's been taken up by members of the same family, and once you get past first semester, that's all that matters. And I'm not sure that too much attention will be paid to it by anyone. The one perhaps more serious point I make is that, if I understood the deputy correctly, to get for a nomination paper for a deputy in one of the districts, you simply need the names of people in that district. So there's no need, for instance, in my own parish to have some people from St Mary, St Peter and St One, and you can concentrate on one parish. And that seems to me to present an inconsistency if you're doing something different for senators. And on that basis, I may well vote against it, but I wait to hear what Deputy Chair says.
Thank you, Conor. Anyone else to speak on this amendment? Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. So I do have a lot of sympathy with what Deputy Sheeran is trying to achieve. However, it does also cause me some considerable concern, having heard the speeches so far. I'm sure we were all advised when we stood, I mean, again, coming back to the multi-parish district, when I stood in 2022, I was given the very wise advice that I should seek to make sure that my proposers and seconders were all from across the district, not just have everybody from Trinity, but to make sure I had a good balance of nominators across all three parishes. And despite the fact that I'd lived here for 25 years, I found that quite difficult, trying to find people that I knew in those three parishes. And it does seem a bit odd, and I slightly have some concern as to how I would go around and check that I know people in all these areas as it is. And that's somebody who's lived here for 30 years, who's reasonably well, has a fairly wide circle of acquaintances. Where that worries me is we've talked quite a lot today about how diverse this assembly is. And if you are not a Jersey, if you're not born and brought up in Jersey, or somebody who's lived here for a long time, if you are perhaps somebody who is Polish, who's lived here for 10 years, you may not know somebody in every parish. Even if you're Portuguese, who's lived in St Helier all that time, or any of our other smaller communities of people who have moved here, I do think this may well create a barrier. It creates a hurdle to people. And we can't say on the one hand, we welcome you into this assembly, and on the other, make it more difficult for them to stand. And I do hear all the issues about people standing. You can't. That's the function of a democracy, is to be open and representative. And if you start trying to limit who can and can't stand, it gets very, very difficult. We could easily, I think even in the UK, you've got to pay some money to stand. That's a barrier to some people. So I do have concerns about the impact of this proposition on some of our other communities and on people who may want to stand and who may find this, as Deputy Taddy says as well, just too much of a barrier for them, or if nothing else, an incredible stress trying to go around and find people who will sign their nomination papers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this amendment? I call upon Deputy Chair to reply. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, and I thank everybody for their contributions. Just directly to respond to Deputy Rob Ward, where the person is registered to vote in an election, at the time of nomination, when that signature, when the signatures are checked and verified, so when the nomination form is handed in, the signatures are then verified, just as they are now with deputies and connotabs. That is the moment of when they will verify that they are in those different deputy districts. It's just as it is now, and of course now we will have a electronic voting system, so it should be easier to be able to find that. But maybe I bring back something Deputy Scott has asked, and some people have said, do you remember the time when the senators in 2018 and before, and the Conotava St Mary's said about the time when there was big show about the nomination forms. I've never voted, I've never been here when there's been senators. So I've never voted for a senator. I left Jersey basically at school, and I never came back. I only came back in 2018, so I came back after the elections, and I wouldn't have been allowed to vote then anyway, because I had to wait a certain amount of time before I could vote. So I've never experienced this. So this whole discussion about senators from the beginning has, for me, been a theoretical exercise, because I've not experienced my vote's being taken away as a voter. I've never experienced having senators represent me or being at hustings with senators. All the things that I have talked about from all the discussions we've had about senators is purely from really an outsider in inverted commas, because I come in from looking at from outside. And why I was prompted to do this amendment is because of my own experience, and Deputy Miller talked about it a bit. I came into a new political system where suddenly I had 3 parishes, and I knew, as somebody who is born in St John's and was married in St John's Church, that I could probably find my way in being in St John's. But Trinity and St Lawrence, I had to go and work. I had to really go and work to not only find my signatures for my nominations, because again, I also was, it was suggested that I should probably show that, I can represent, I'm not just a one parish lady. I am, I will represent as a deputy, I will represent all 3 parishes, that I have that loyalty will be extended to all 3. But I had to go and find people to ask. And so I went to people that, I went to prominent people within the parishes that they didn't know. They didn't know me. They may know my name, but they didn't know me. I had to sell my manifesto to them before I could get their signature. So I worked very hard from this, and we actually heard from the Conotab of St Lawrence earlier about maybe having independence of St Lawrence. And I hope she agrees that we feel a bit more accepted in her parish now. But it has been work to show the parishioners of St Lawrence that we have that loyalty as much as anybody else. And it started when we needed to do the nominations. And so that is why I felt that when we're now talking about senators and having that island-wide mandate, and the fact that everybody is really talking about that, and as I say, I come at this from a theoretical place, I would hope that that's part of the process, one's process in doing it. I hope that no one's scrambling around. Because the point of when you're building your manifesto should be an island-wide manifesto. So you should be already talking to people, to finding out what it is in the island that needs to be done. That one big idea that Deputy Tadier was talking about. Hopefully you've tested it. You've tested it ahead of time, and those are the people that you could then potentially have to sign your signature. We are only talking about 9 people. It's exactly the same as currently. You need to have one proposer, which could be for anywhere on the island, anybody registered to vote on the island. So you're looking for 9 extra people, one from each of the parishes, and I apologise, districts, and I apologise it's not parishes, but that was, I went back and forth with the formula, but I felt from a representative perspective, the deputy districts had been thought about more in that sense, and we now have got deputy constituencies, whether we like it or not. And so that's why I felt that was a more representative, so that it's not forcing the candidates to go and kind of understand a bit more about the different districts around Jersey, but it is about that pre-election discussion. You have to build your manifesto. I feel if you want to be credible, and I'm not talking about the no-hopers, they still could be credible in that Deputy Taddy again said with that one big idea, but that idea should at least be sold to 9 people. And I think that there are ways that part of that selling your manifesto, selling yourself as somebody that could be in a senatorial role, having that experience of being able to go find 9 people, 1 from each district, for me, I don't feel is a big barrier. And I think it's from my own experience, and I really would help that. And it was already, I think, and again, I haven't seen senators, but it was already quite exhausting being in the elections for the district elections. It was a lot of work. It shouldn't be just a flip of a hat and being able to feel that you can go and sell yourself as a senator candidate. If you want to be a senatorial candidate, if you want to represent Ireland-wide, some work does have to be done. You have to build that manifesto, and to ask 9 people from around Jersey to also support you, I don't think is a slightly higher bar, but I don't think it is out of the reach for anyone. And I take the point from Deputy Tadier about it doesn't guarantee a wider socioeconomic background thing. I'm not sure if I said guaranteed. I apologise if I did. I would hope, though, that it means that discussion that happens post-nomination would and building of the manifesto is where hopefully candidates would have those discussions that maybe can understand that there are different communities in Jersey and go and talk to those different ones if you want to represent Ireland-wide. So with that, again, thank you for those that contributed, and I hope everybody will support, the members will support my amendment, and I call for the appel.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The amendment has been narrowly rejected, 20 votes for, 22 votes contra.
We have the names, sir, please. We have the names, please.
Yes,
of
the
board.
names. Yes.
Those voting for, the Connotabs of Trinity, St Martin, St John and St Clement, and deputies Labby, Tadier, Morel, Lehegara, Ayer, Farnham, Miles, Renouf, Curtis, Rosebinet, Jearn and Wilson, and online, Deputy Coles, Gardner, Stevenson and Doublé. Those voting contre, the Connotabs of St Lawrence, St Brelard, St Peter, Grouville, St Juan, St Mary and St Saviour, and deputies Luce, Rob Ward, Gorst, Mezek, War, Scott, Feltham, Miller, Howell, Tombinet, Ferry, Barbara Ward and Deputy Andrews, and online deputies Kovac and Elves.
We now move on to the articles, return to the articles as amended. Does any member speak on the articles? If no member speak on the articles, then is the appel called for?
Yes, please, sir.
The appel has been called for. Members are asked to return to their seats. Members are now voting on the articles in second reading. 25 members are required.
Sorry, excuse me, sir. Which articles are we voting for?
The articles of the law as proposed by the Chair of PPC,
Okay.
as amended slightly in the debate we've had this afternoon. You're voting on the articles in the second reading. So 25 votes are required for these articles to be adopted, and I invite the greffier to open the voting on the articles. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The articles have been adopted in second reading. 30 votes pour, 14 votes contre.
Could we have 30, please?
Yes.
Those voting for the Connotabs of St Lawrence, St Brelard, Trinity, St Peter, St Martin, St Clement, Bruville, St Juan, St Mary and St Saviour. Deputies Labby, Luce, Morel, Lehegara, Gorst, Farnham, War, Miles, Scott, Rose Binet, Jean, Miller, Howell, Tom Binet, Ferry, Barbara Ward, Wilson and Andrews, and online, Deputy Stevenson and Deputy Gardner. Those voting contre, the Connotabs of St Helier and St John, and Deputies Tadier, Ayer, Rob Ward, Mezek, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, and online, Deputies Porre, Kovac, Dublé, Alves, and Coles.
Chair of PPC, do you propose the matter in third reading?
Indeed, I do, sir.
Is the matter seconded? Thank you.
Sir.
Does anyone wish to speak on the articles as adopted in third reading? Connotab of Breville.
Thank you, sir. Don't worry. So when the roadshow came to Greville Parish Hall, there were 64 people present. I was very proud of the turnout. There was only one dissenting voice in the hall that night against senators, and Deputy Miller's looking at him. If you remember, sir, I was definitely opposed to senators, and I said so on the doorsteps around my parish. However, as my colleague Deputy Luce has already said, I probably could have lost the election on that very one point, but luckily I didn't, because 80% of the parishioners that I saw on the doorstep were in favour of the return of senators. I thought they were a vanity exercise. I didn't think they fulfilled their remit. There were many reasons why I didn't want them back, but it's no doubt at all my parishioners do, and I'm here to represent them, sir, so I will vote for. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I rise simply to make the point, knowing that this particular battle has been lost, but it may have been 80% of people on the doorstep that told the Constable of Greville that they supported bringing senators back, and that is exactly the same percentage that voted to scrap them in the 2013 referendum, and it really is, I think, embarrassing for this Assembly that that process went through, and a couple of anecdotes on the doorsteps has totally undermined that and will be giving us a less representative electoral system. It does not reflect well on us.
Thank both members who have spoken so far, and remind members that the debate should be confined to the content of the draft as adopted in second reading. Deputy Ferry.
Yes, thank you, sir. I'm going to find it hard to focus on the concept of the draft, because what I wanted to say is, if you want to look for tenacity, then look no further than Deputy Miller, who went around the whole island at a time when the turnout wasn't always brilliant, but the debate was always heated, and people were always engaged. And the people who did express a view really had heartfelt opinions. And all the opinions that I heard in my parish, although there were a very small number, were to the positive. So I congratulate Deputy Miller for the work that she's put into this.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I just really wanted to address the idea that every debate was very heated, because I must admit those in St John's and St Lawrence were not so heated at all, sir. They were very one-sided and in favour of senators. I also wanted to say that I think the concept of the draft is outstanding, sir, and I shall be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Minister.
Before I address the contents of the draft, sir, I just wanted to refer to the hustings. I remember when Deputy Morrow went to the hustings in 2018, and I remember those 3 answers I gave, sir. I wanted to thank him for recognising them. Still remember them. And I wanted to recognise also the chair of PPC and thank him for his Herculean effort when dealing with the contents of the draft, for dealing with it in such a straight bat and a neutral manner. It's appreciated. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak in third reading? Conor St Martin.
I'd just like to say to our hustings, when Deputy Miller came, it was quite heated. And I know that lots of people in here, I did vote against the senators. Today I voted for the senators because we voted earlier in the year to have the senators, and I thought I'd uphold democracy, but please think of me when I go home this evening, because my immediate family do not agree with senators. So,
Thank you, Conor. Does anyone else wish to speak in third reading? Deputy Brenner, then Deputy Sadia.
Yes, it's a profoundly depressing situation that we find ourselves in. I think we've arrived at a position with these articles where emotion has triumphed over reason, and we have allowed a small number of highly passionate people who want to see the return of the senators to trump all else. I think the idea that we have to vote for these articles because the public are expecting it is nonsense. I can say very confidently that outside of the political bubble, most people have no idea that senators are coming back and don't care either way. We vastly overstate the level of interest in politics and the level of knowledge. We are focused on that tiny number who do vote, who do phone us up and whatever, but our real challenge is not those people, it is the people who do not vote. And that should be our commitment, and that should be what commands our attention. I think many members are indeed bewitched by the number of people who come and tell them they want senators back. That tells us that people who believe in senators talk to people who support senators. I'm not sure if I've been contacted by a single constituent about senators. I apologise if I've forgotten someone. It's possible that some time ago someone did. I suspect the reason is that those who are interested in this issue know that I'm not on their side. And if you ask younger people about senators, as I have, they don't even know what you're talking about. And of course, we've had the debate about the data, which shows that there is no evidence to back up this assertion whenever the figures are actually quoted, as opposed to the anecdote, the things that people tell people in the pub and so on. The data shows unequivocally that people are not really interested in this issue. 3% of people who didn't vote, when asked about the reasons they didn't vote, only 3% said the reason was because there wasn't senators. It's a minority sport. And that is the fallacy on which this entire debate hinges. Unfortunately, the articles as they stand now do not involve a correction to the most egregious fault within the original proposition. We had a chance to correct that. It fell agonisingly short. I think that's frankly scandalous.
However you calculate the figures, whichever table you were to come up with, we are leaving voters in parts of St Helier severely underrepresented compared to some of the rural districts. If we had political parties across the whole of Jersey, this would be called by its true name, which is gerrymandering. The definition of gerrymandering is to favour one particular group or party. If we had parties in the countryside as well as the predominantly urban reform, it would make visible what is now slightly concealed. It would be quite clearly disadvantaging an urban party of the left against a more conservative rural party. Political parties don't currently operate throughout the island, but it is still true to say that the electoral system, whether by accident or design, is going to disadvantage voter representation in parts of St Helier. We will be solidly criticised after the next election by the electoral observers, but of course we don't really care about that. What do outsiders know of our funny local ways? If we want to mess up the fairness of the electoral system because it pleases us to do so, that's our business. And that casualness about matters of deep principle worries me enormously. Whatever your politics, it is simply unacceptable to knowingly distort your electoral system in this way, and that we seem to care so little about this is a profound disappointment. The long-established problems with senators remain. Senatorial candidates favour the well-off. The cap will be £10,000 odd. You will need to be prepared to risk that amount of money or risk being outgunned by those who can afford to pay it. Perhaps that seems a trivial point to supporters of senators, but how many plumbers or teachers or care workers can afford £10,000? The simple truth is they can't. And that too is a political bias that remains in this proposition, because the people for whom £10,000 is a stretch are more likely to be from the left. So, sir, in conclusion, I think we have a bad law. We've resisted the chance to make it better through the amendments. There's no reason why we have to continue with a bad law because it was voted for by a single vote after two previous failed attempts to do so. It is a flawed, bad law, and we should vote against it.
So, sir, may I ask for a point of clarification, please?
Prepared to accept one? Yes.
Thank you, sir. I believe that the deputy said we will be criticised by the electoral observers following the next election. My understanding has always been that they must be invited by us to observe. Is the deputy telling us that that has been done, sir?
No, sir, that's a good point. I was slightly taking it for granted that we would invite electoral observers to observe, and I would very much hope, having made a significant change to the electoral system, that we don't bottle out and decide that we don't want to be observed. I think that would be absurd.
Deputy Tadier.
So I'm going to take a slightly different tone because, as I've said, it's not all bad having senators back. I think I am going to speak in the third reading because we're talking about what we're left with and the potential changes that maybe could have been made that haven't been made, whether this is still worth some of us supporting it, even though it hasn't had those, what I would call ameliorating amendments go through. The first thing I would say, I suppose, whilst I think of it, is that well, let's take it back one step. I have no problem admitting that I'm a slightly political insider because I was born in Jersey and I followed Jersey politics from a young age. And there is something exciting about the senatorial election, isn't there? Irrespective of how it's going to roll out. It's where all the focus is. It's where those who like to follow local politics are able to make an outing what is once every 4 years now and just see what's going on, support their candidates or make commentaries alongside it. And I know that those in the media also like that. Whether it's bread and circuses, I'll leave others decide. But we are talking about whether we should pass this in the third reading, and a lot of the arguments made in previous parts of the debate about giving the parishes more work and giving the electoral administrators in each parish more work, especially because it's the parish secretaries. What we'll be voting for, the constables will be voting to give more work to all the volunteers in the parishes and to the electoral administrators and to the Royal Court by having another election, because we are voting for another election. The senators is another election, which is going to take place concurrently on the same day. And so not only will all the counters have to sit there and count and transport the ballots if it's in a multi-parish constituency, or even indeed in a multi polling station constituency, such as many of them are, that they will have to transport those, they'll have to count them, they'll have to count for the constables' elections, they'll have to count for the deputies' elections, they'll have to stay up well into the night or possibly reconvene the next day on a Monday after they've just been working on a Sunday. That's going to take them, the vast majority of the counting time will be for senators, because you've got to process all of those ballot papers and have a system to tally up to 9 votes, but of course not everyone will be using those 9 votes. I think it's a shame that we didn't have time to consider other voting systems, if I'm honest. I think you could bring senators back, but the recommendation of the Electoral Commission, which both Deputy Balash and Deputy Renouf served on, the forgotten recommendations for that commission were that we should look at alternative votes for single seat elections and single transferable votes for multi-seat elections. And it is the case, and I think this is the point that Deputy Scott has made or tried to make in the past, which maybe hasn't been fully understood, is that in multi-seat constituencies, all of the seats can be won by a large minority group, whether that's an organised party or just the same people voting for the same type of candidate. And that's why, of course, we see in other places like the UK, when they have ward elections for the council, incidentally, it's an argument about the number of votes that one has, and we will still have a system, of course, where there are different numbers of votes for different people in different districts. So I think particularly of Grouville and St Martin's, who if the three representatives for Grouville and St Martin's, and of course the 2 constables for Grouville and St Martin's respectively, all vote for this, they are saying to their constituents in that area, you're going to have 1 less deputy that you can vote for. And of course, the trade-off that you're going to have to sell to them is that you're going to get 9 senators back for that. And they may be fine about that, but it might be, of course, that they find it difficult to accept that if the constituency work is not being done by the senators. But we'll see if that emerges, and that goes for all of the parishes. But getting back to the point of the wards, of course, is that it's fully recognised in the UK that a single party can take all of the seats by getting 33% of the vote, whether that's Labour, Conservative or Liberal Democrat. You're probably less likely to get it with the minority parties. And that doesn't mean that, of course, any one party in Jersey would clean up at any one election. But what it does mean is that you can get grouping. So if there's a particularly Conservative element that dominates in a large minority in one particular constituency, let's call it the Island constituency, that is traditionally how it has worked, that the establishment, if you like, in Jersey, the old regime, have relied on a default large minority to come out and know which candidates to vote for. But that may not always be the case. So I suppose my message, sir, when considering whether or not this is still right to vote for it in the third reading without the safeguards of some more sophisticated electoral system, voting system to put in place, is that beware of the unintended consequences that might arise from having 9 seats where your first vote and your 9th vote all have exactly the same value, sir. Like Deputy Renouf, but slightly, hopefully less pessimistically, I think that, yes, we could have had an opportunity to put in some safeguards. I think it is a shame that, ironically, I have to say it, by an abstention from the Constable of St Martin's, who is complaining about the representation of St Martin's being reduced, that she's actually decided not to vote on a critical amendment that did actually make the difference. If she'd have voted the other way, of course, we would have had a fairer electoral system. But that's not what we're going to get today. We're going to be left with a situation where, unfortunately, we are moving further away from the Venice Convention. And that wasn't necessary. We could have had the best of both worlds. We could have had an accommodation that recognised the fact that we do have, if not binding obligations, we have obligations to our fellow partners in the Commonwealth. And I do look at the leader, if you like, of the CPA that we've appointed in this Assembly, Deputy Ward, and I would ask what he makes of the fact that we are straying further and further away from parliamentary norms that would be accepted in the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association if we vote for this in the third reading, at a time actually when we should be trying to set a good example around the Commonwealth and saying that we don't want to make our representation worse in certain constituencies. So I'd be interested to know if the CPA side of that has, indeed, you know, perhaps Deputy Lehegerat, who has voted for this as the leader of the CWP, so that of the women parliamentarians for the Commonwealth, how she will explain the fact that St Helier has got even worse representation than it had before, and it's moving further and further away from the Venice Commission norms when we had an opportunity to correct that, sir. So I find myself in a position, actually, genuinely, I came into this debate thinking that if certain amendments had been accepted, notably that if Constable of St Helier and the separate election days had been voted for, I think I and hope maybe the party would have been in a position where we could have supported this. But as it stands, I don't think this is something I can vote for in good conscience, even though St Brillard's representation remains effectively exactly the same. We will have, I think, the correct representation. But that's not the case for other districts that I can think of, which include certainly St Helier, but also other districts. And I would ask members to consider whether or not they still need to vote for this in the third reading.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you. From judging from the last few speeches, people still haven't understood the numbers and how this works. The more senators you have, the less imbalance between I know people don't agree with me, but the actual numbers have not been worked out in any form. I mean, just simply like saying, 7 senators is the same as 9 in terms of this distribution. The numbers will be better. And talking about gerrymandering, the absolute neatest system, and I actually think, because here we've got, states members still kind of struggling with the numbers, that actually if you had only 2 class of member, senators, and then constables, you basically gave them a proportion of 1 vote in accordance with their districts, you wouldn't be ever worrying about gerrymandering, and it would be, I think, probably easier to work out each time on an actual vote. We've got the technology, it's about maths, but I really do appreciate that anything like that is just a bit too difficult for people to conceive. But that's all I've actually... And I actually think that this can be regarded quite potentially as a transitional thing. Deputy Tadier's mentioned that ATV, I actually think that it has got a lot. I can support that. But actually, there is more work to be done. Deputy Renouf mentioned the unfairness of independent candidates or any candidate, basically, a senatorial candidate funding a campaign. And I've actually had discussions with Deputy Mezek in the past about this, who's said that the answer is to have a political party. On the other hand, you might say, well, maybe we should just have much more reduced campaigns, what you can actually do, how many posters you can have, almost get that funded by the GREF, but make sure that everything is equal. There is more work that can be done and going in a better direction And I think that perhaps a little bit more thinking out the box could be helpful, but we have got where we are. It is actually better the more senators you have. And in fact, if we carried on working in that way and thinking a bit more about how that can be worked through, then that could be helpful too. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Feltham.
Thank you, sir. I'll try and address the articles. I've been flicking through to find the relevant ones, so hopefully I get them correct. I see the graphier looking. Sorry? Okay. I'll make the... I won't then refer to the articles. I'll make my points on the legislation that we now have. Is that what we now have is that the most popular districts will be underrepresented within this legislation. I'll remind members what those districts are, or what those parishes are. They're the parishes of St Helier, St Saviour and St Brelard. So in my view, any representative of those parishes are really doing their parishes a real disservice by voting through this legislation. This legislation doesn't meet the requirements of the Venice Convention and quite clearly makes significant changes to our electoral system less than a year before the election. In my mind, that this is poor legislation and it's an embarrassment to the Assembly.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. I could spend a very long time addressing some of the comments that have been made, but I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is to thank everyone for their efforts, both in this debate and for the one we had in March. We've said several times today, people have pointed out that this is the most diverse Assembly we've ever had. And this most diverse Assembly has had 2 democratic debates and on both times have broadly supported the return of senators. I have absolutely no doubt that it is what very, very many members of the public want. And you can shut your ears to that, and I think it's wrong to set one to say the poor downtrodden south against the rich and wealthy north is very, very unfortunate, and I simply don't think that's the case. At the end of the day, people felt a loss when senators were removed from this Assembly, and we can have all sorts of theories, all sorts of intelligent arguments, all sorts of... Anybody they want can come and comment on this island and how it does things. And they will be doing that through their own lens. They will be doing that through lenses of vastly different voting systems. There are numerous different voting systems. Is what we have perfect? Probably not. But I have absolute faith that very many of the public want this. And at the end of the day, everybody, every single person who votes has 8 more votes in this election. And people have spoken to me and said they couldn't vote because there was nobody they wanted to vote for in their district. They wanted senators back. And these are people in St Helier. So we reached a decision in March. Most of us have supported this so far. And we've talked about people why they didn't vote, because nothing ever changes, because lack of trust. This is making a change. It is making a change that I do believe the vast majority of the public want. And if we reject this now, what it does for trust in this Assembly, it will go through the floor. So I really encourage everybody who supported this to continue their support and to vote in the 3rd reading. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Colin St John.
Thank you, sir. So I'd also like to pay tribute to the chair of PPC, who's, I think, and his team have done a great job. So I have the opposite problem to my colleague to my left, to the Constable of St Martin, sir. I'm going to go home and talk to my wife, who is adamant that she would like to see senators back in the island. So one person in my household will be happy, sir. Sir, the previous speaker, sir, spoke about a lack of trust, and I will remind members, sir, we lost the public's trust, sir, when we didn't implement the results of the referendum that the public spoke about, sir. So earlier in this week, we've heard about from some members in a different debate about the lack of data. Sir, I'd just like to correct Deputy Renoff. Voting this through doesn't give a £10,000 cap to senatorial candidates. If there are 72,000 people on the electoral list, which we expect, that will give candidates up to £13,776 to spend on a campaign, sir. But other data we should consider is the Jersey Opinion Lifestyle. 3% of those people surveyed said they didn't vote because they weren't senators. 3%, sir. Or another percentage, sir, is the 80% of Irelanders who voted for change, and change that didn't include senators, sir. But I must remind members not to let the facts get in the way, sir. Thank you.
Sir.
Deputy Morale?
Sir, yes, may I ask a point of clarification? It may or may not be necessary.
One?
Thank you. It was just, I understood the connotab to say that Deputy Morell said about the £10,000. Maybe I misheard the Morell bit, but I didn't.
Beg your pardon, sir. Deputy Renoff, I was referring to. Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Renoff you referred to. Does anyone else wish to speak on the articles as adopted? Deputy Rob Ward.
Yeah, thanks. Just to respond to partly something Deputy Tevye had said, I'm actually really proud to be a chair of the CPA. I've been incredibly pleased to take something that will stay with me after whatever political career I have ends, and I'm really, really pleased with it. What would the approach be? It would be that we are not up to international standards. We've made changes less than a year before the election, that we have unequal representation in terms of the equity of people's votes and its value, and as a jurisdiction, as an assembly, originally just 25 people backed that in the principles by a very thin margin. So that's all I would be able to say. In terms of an election, £32,000, didn't know that. Oh well, things are looking up a bit. I think that the key here, is to the amount of money that, whatever it was, £13,000? £13,000, yeah, yes. I was going to say, but things are still looking up a little bit. I think the key here is to recognise that what I'm looking forward to with this, if it is voted for, which I really hope it isn't actually, is that there is a clear then explanation on all the hustings and from all the candidates as to what these senators are there for and what the difference between senatorial representation and deputy representation and constable representation is on this assembly. Because at the moment we sit here and we all have one vote each. So our votes are equal in here. Our representation may not be equal. And we're not going to encourage people to vote unless we have a clear definition. I will say, can't take things personally, but the notion that you have the amount of votes according to those who vote is just so far from democracy that it doesn't even warrant a response, and we need to move on from that because that's ridiculous. And so subsequently we need to move on as to where we're going to go. I think voting for this and removing deputy representation from St Helier is a huge error. And as I've said before, and I say this in third reading now, that the overall effect of that will be to stop that direct representation in an area where it is perhaps most needed at time, where the most concentrated population is. In St Helier North, with growing population, certainly in St Helier Central, with the growing estates, a number of people there, particularly with certain demographics. St Helier South, that is not a good thing to do. And I hope that senatorial people, those who are successful in the senatorials, recognise the importance of that constituency work still. And that's a concern, and I think that is a question that needs to be asked on the hustings. How you do your constituency work with people all of the time? Or will you consider to be above it? Because I hope not, because that just increases workload for deputies beyond what is capable, and the representation won't even be there at the time. And that's where we gain respect in our districts and with people, and how it's not even just about being accessible, it's about trying to help. It's difficult when you take on different roles, of course it is, and you help in a wider perspective, but there you go. And I think we have to consider how we will ensure that we have a genuine meritocracy in this assembly in terms of the roles that people take, and not just simply say those who took the risk and had the backing and had the money to stand for senator, those who are more organised, those who are more structured, those who perhaps have wider backing and can put candidates forward, which I'm thinking through, actually, is quite good, actually, don't get overrepresented in terms of those senatorial elections and therefore the influence on this assembly. Because as we have seen previously in the debates, I've been very pleased to stand up and say, well done to, in the previous debate, which I know we've not finished yet, so well done to the scrutiny panel and to those who are here, because you've gone and the Minister has listened and we've worked together. I am seriously concerned that this will bring a wider division in terms of the roles that we have, because they are simply not clearly defined. We had a system that has worked. It brought us to this assembly. Good, bad or indifferent as to what you think about each other, you know, we work together. We should have given that another run through. We should give that another run through to see how that pans out, because we've made another change and we are not consistent. And I can see absolutely no reason for doing it. Just having more people to vote for. If there's no one there that you want to vote for, you've got no people to vote for. And if people just vote for the sake of it, that is not a great idea. So I would encourage people to not vote for this in third reading. Give the run through again, final try. But you've got to be consistent in your principles, sir, and I certainly will. I do not think this is a good move forward for this assembly and for the democracy on this island. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on the matter in third reading? Police Officer Mott, I think you've spoken already, have you not? You did speak about going home tonight. And no, in this session, it may feel like a bit. Anyone else? I call upon the Chair to reply. Chair of PPC.
Thank you, sir. And I want to thank members who have spoken in this debate. I will just respond to Deputy Renouf because he asked about the CPA election observers. It is not intended at this time to ask the CPA election observers to come back next year. If that would be the case, we would require a growth bid, and that would be very difficult to obtain. This is not the last time we will be debating election matters, as we will need to lodge a short set of supplementary regulations to bring together all of the different parts of the election legislation strands once all of the primary legislation adopted by the Assembly in relation to the Draft Elections Electoral Register Amendment Law P27 and the Draft Elections Amendment Law P28 has been registered in the Royal Court. However, it is hopefully the last time when we have a substantial debate, and I hope that members will be mindful that if they wish to make any major changes to the elections legislation or the composition of this Assembly in the future, they should try to do so as early in the term of office as possible, as it really is not acceptable to be implementing such major changes to the island's electoral systems so close to the next election. Not only does it ignore the recommendations of 2 successive CPA election observers' missions and what is widely regarded as best practice in line with the Venice Commission, but it is well documented that substantive changes to elections law in the year of an election undermines public confidence in the process. I wish to place on record PPC's thanks to GREF officers and the legislative drafter for working so hard to bring this forward as swiftly as possible. It really was no mean feat, and we are all very grateful. As Chair of PPC, I very much hope that the reinstatement of the senators is the magic bullet which brings voters back to the polling station. If it isn't, then it will be a matter for the next PPC to determine what else can be done to bring about greater public engagement. Sir, I make the proposition in third reading and call for the appel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have opted of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close close the voting. The law has been adopted in third reading. 28 votes for, 17 votes contra, and no abstentions.
Could we have all the votes, please?
Yes.
So, those voting pour, the Connotabs of St Lawrence, St Brallard, Trinity, St Peter, St Clement, Grouville, St Juan, St Mary and St Saviour, Deputies Labby, Luce, Morel, Lehegara, Horst, Farnham, War, Miles, Scott, Rose Binet, Jean, Miller, Howell, Tom Binet, Ferry, Barbara Wards and Max and Deputy Andrews, and online those voting for Deputy Stevenson and Gardner. Those voting contre, the Connotabs of St Helier, St Martin, St John, and Deputies Southern, Tadier, Ayer, Rob Ward, Mezek, Renouf, Catherine Curtis, Faltham, Wilson, and online Deputies Coles, Alves, Dublé, Kovac, and Porre.
The next item of business is extension of Section 75, Electronic Travel Authorisation of the Nationality and Borders Act, 2022 to Jersey, lodged by the Chief Minister. The main respondent is the Chair of the Children, Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel. The amendment lodged has been withdrawn. I ask the greffier to read the citation.
The States are asked to decide whether they're of opinion, A, to signify, pursuant to Article 31 of the States of Jersey Law 2005, that they agree that a request be made to His Majesty in Council for the making of an order in Council to extend with appropriate modifications Section 75 of the Nationality and Borders Act 2022 to Jersey, and B, to signify their agreement to the proposed order in Council entitled the Immigration Electronic Travel Authorisation, Jersey Order 2025, in Appendix 1 to this proposition.
Chief Minister, will you make the proposition?
I will, sir, and the Home Affairs Minister will be acting as rapporteur.
Yes, Minister of Home Affairs.
Thank you, sir. Sir, this proposition represents an important step in strengthening Jersey's border security and keeping us aligned with other partners in the common travel area. The proposition before us seeks the Assembly's agreement to request His Majesty in Council to extend, with modifications, Section 75 of the UK's Nationality and Borders Act 2022 to Jersey, enabling the introduction of an electronic travel authorisation scheme. What is an ETA? An ETA is not a visa. It is a quick online pre-travel check for certain visitors who do not already require a visa to come to Jersey. It authorises the person to travel, but entry is still decided by our border officers on arrival. British and Irish citizens will not need an ETA, nor will those who already hold valid immigration permission to live, work or study in Jersey, or in the UK or other Crown dependencies. Why are we introducing it? At present, many non-visa nationals can travel to Jersey with limited prior checks. This leaves a gap in our ability to assess risks before people arrive. Introducing an ETA will close that gap, giving us the ability to screen travellers in advance, just as the UK and many other countries, including the United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, who are already doing it. The European Union will be introducing European entry and exit system on the 12th of October, which is an IT system for registering non-EU nationals travelling for short stays. Following that, the European Travel Information and Authorisation System, an equivalent to ETA, will be introduced in 2026. Guernsey and the Isle of Man are also preparing for a similar introduction of ETA to that proposed in Jersey. It will help prevent those who pose a threat to our community from even beginning their journey. Alignment with the Common Travel Area is important. Members will be aware that Jersey is part of the Common Travel Area, and our residents benefit from free and easy movement throughout the British Isles and Ireland. Aligning our immigration systems with our CTA partners protects that privilege. If we fail to align, we risk operational divergence, leading to confusion for travellers, reputational damage, and even the possibility of restrictions being placed on movement from Jersey into the UK. On a practical level, the ETA will be valid for 2 years, cost £16, and will allow multiple visits during that time. Most applications will be decided in minutes though travellers should allow up to 3 working days for processing. It will be administered by the UK on our behalf, but according to the rules set out under our immigration rules, ensuring efficiency and integration with the wider CTA system. The UK will offer this service to Jersey without charge, meaning that the costs to Jersey for implementing ETAs will be negligible. There will be some exceptions, such as for certain organised French school groups, to support our cultural and educational ties. It is essential that we seek to protect islanders by preventing harm before it reaches our shores. But equally, we must maintain an open, welcoming environment for visitors and businesses. This scheme achieves both a stronger, smarter border and a smoother experience for legitimate travellers. Sir, at this point, I would like to thank Deputy Baloch for withdrawing his amendment, and also to members say this is a proportionate, modern measure that protects Jersey, upholds our obligations within the CTA, and aligns us with our closest partners. I commend the proposition to the Assembly and urge members to support it. Thank you, sir.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Deputy Morell.
May I have a point of clarification, please?
Yes.
Yes, of course, sir.
Sir, I was wondering if the Minister, in her speech, she said that school groups will be protected, visiting school groups will not need, effectively, an ETA. Could she confirm that that will also be the case for day trippers from France?
Sir, yes, I will confirm that as far as the day trippers, the ETA and the day tripper scheme is 2 total separate things, and we will be putting that scheme within the immigration rules.
Thank you. Deputy Howe.
Could I also ask a point of clarification, sir, please?
You're set one, Minister?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Deputy Howe.
Is the cost going to be £16 for each child as well as each adult? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Sir, from my memory, sir, I don't think that children will be actually paying for this, but if anybody wants to make any speeches, I can certainly clarify that if I have a moment in order to run through the rest of my information, sir, but I don't have that right readily to hand.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. This Assembly is probably used to me making speeches that question, well, they don't question, they condemn the UK's decision to leave the European Union, certainly the UK's decision to leave the single market and the customs union. We are seeing sir, the customs union, the leaving of the European Customs Union harming this island in more and more ways. And as far as leaving the European Union is concerned, this ETA system is real proof of the wedge that the UK's decision is driving between us, Jersey, and our European neighbours. For if the UK had stayed within that system, visitors to Jersey would indeed have needed the European EES, which is being brought in later this year. They would not have needed something different, which is the case. So basically, we've got the European Union with one electronic travel authorisation system and the British Isles and Jersey with the second electronic travel authorisation system. And as a result, we now have to make sure that in order to go to France, 14 miles away, as we all know, we can see it, we now need to get an extra document. Yes, yes. Constable of Grouville can see it. Deputy of St. Lawrence certainly cannot. And, but we now need to get, as well as our passport, we now need to get a prior electronic travel authorisation. In order to go to the EU, we'll need to renew that every couple of years. Those are kind of personal comments. This little bit is with my ministerial hat on. But importantly, from a tourism perspective, all European citizens are now going to need, in order to come to Jersey, an electronic travel authorisation in advance of coming to Jersey, thereby putting another cost. It may be small, but it's still another cost, another piece of administration that they have to undertake in order to get here between them and making a decision to come to Jersey. This is going to have almost certainly a negative impact on tourism. I say all of this, and I am not, this is not in an attempt to ask members to vote against. This is an attempt for me to say, you know, this is a result of the UK's decision to leave the European Union, and it's something that Jersey is suffering. And this is yet another cut caused by that suffering. And, you know, I have to say, I'll take my ministerial hat off now. I have to say, from a personal perspective, I was disappointed that Deputy Balash withdrew his proposition, because I think it is extremely important that we at some point begin to have a debate on our relationship with Europe, because that has not happened in the last 5 years since Brexit. And I put my colleague, the Minister for External Relations, on notice that between now and the end of this term, I do intend to bring a proposition that does seek for this Assembly to, in some way, explore our own thinking about what would we like to see from our relationship with Europe, and how much control would we like to take with regard to that relationship with Europe. Because Jersey has had no say in the UK's decision to leave the European Union. Jersey had no say, but it affects us directly. I speak with the fishing industry on a regular basis. Sadly, some days it's daily, because of the troubles that they're experiencing, which is entirely down to the UK leaving the European Union and basically making it very hard for them to access their markets. There are many other areas where we see it. We also see it in the fact that it is now hard to import goods from St. Malo, just 30 miles away, effectively because we are no longer part of the European Union. And yet at the same time, we have seen Northern Ireland given the very status that Jersey used to have in terms of goods and trade. And so that has been taken away. And so, sir, I think the word support is the wrong word for this, this proposition. I think, you know, we must hold our noses and vote for this proposition, but I don't think really this Assembly should support it from within. It's something we have to do to maintain the good administration of this island, but it is something that I think we as an Assembly should really start thinking about. What does Jersey want from its position in the world? We are not part of the UK. We are not part of Europe. We sit between the two. But geographically, we will never move further away from Europe. We will never move closer to the UK. We will always be here, much closer to France than we are to the UK. And I do think it's high time, after 5 years of silence on this subject, that this Assembly broke its silence and started to talk and discuss what we would like to see from our relationship with the United Kingdom. From the United Kingdom and Europe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Morell used to have the pleasure of sitting next to me in the Assembly. And I don't...
Sir, if I may, a point of clarification, it was a pleasure, sir.
And I don't know if this is a parliamentary word, we both used to sit there and chunter away about what was happening with Brexit. We agreed on that. And I agree with what he said, this is a product of that. And, inevitable that we're going to be in this place. And I think you're right, no choice but to support this. I do have one question. If there is a simplicity, and it's good, the simplicity for French school children to come across to Jersey to experience Jersey, I'm not sure whether that's reciprocated for English school children to go to France in a simpler way to visit Saint Malo or any of the Brittany coast. And I imagine that when school children go off island, I'll take many a trip to Europe in different places, they would have to go through this full system. There's a number of acronyms for it actually on the government website in the UK. And I would ask the Home Affairs Minister, but we should, talking as a Minister now, sit down and talk about the way we can assist school parties with that, because it might be something that they could do with some help with as they arrange trips off island, because they will happen in Europe. So really, it was just to ask that question about whether there's a reciprocity, lovely word, with France in terms of the way our children go to France. And yes, we do have to sort of hold our nose, but this was an inevitable product of the wonder that is Brexit. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Conrad Iverson Saviour.
Thank you, sir. I would dearly love to have the same relationship as the province of Northern Ireland with France. I think that's something we need to explore. My question, sir, is to the Minister, and I think it's touched upon by other members, and of course, Deputy Balash. Could the Minister explain the proposed relationship between the UK Secretary of State and Jersey ministers regarding a possible acting in place of or even overruling? Thanks.
Does anyone else want to speak on this proposition? Chief Minister.
Thank you, sir. Members, just bear with me. I mean, I can start by, I had prepared a response to Deputy Balash's amendments, and I fully recognise the weight of that concern. Jersey's constitutional autonomy is of fundamental importance, and we would not compromise that. So it is enshrined in our relationship with the Crown and underpins our system of self-government. And nothing in the proposition, nothing in Section 11E changes that. Section E does not hand authority to the UK over Jersey's borders. It creates an option, a permissive power for Jersey to request the Secretary of State to carry out certain functions on our behalf. It cannot happen without our request, and it cannot be imposed upon us. The initiative rests with Jersey, and I just wanted to make that clear. As Deputy Morrow, I don't think any of us really, not many of us wanted to be in this position post-Brexit with extra layers of bureaucracy, but here we are. Guernsey and the Isle of Man are following suit. If we don't do it, could possibly be excluded. So we have to do it. I'll leave it there, sir, because it's getting late. And just to be helpful, sir, the £16 charge does apply to children, and it's valid for 2 years. It's not a charge every time you come in. It's a 2-year charge. It's valid for up to 2 years. Well, that's the proposal at the moment. It could change up to 2 years or until your passport expires, sir, if it's shorter than 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Minister. No one else wishes to speak. I call upon the Minister to reply. Minister.
Thank you, sir. Firstly, I thank the Chief Minister for managing to find that piece of information. I'm not at my best at this time of day. In relation to about deterring visitors from Europe, evidence from other jurisdictions, Australia and the US, and soon will be obviously the EU, shows that visitors adapt quickly to the low cost and its straightforward requirements in relation to ETA. But what I really would like to highlight to people, and I fully accept that we are content and would be content in relation to our European neighbours, but this is really about also our border security. It is about prevention, not just reaction. It's about us knowing who's coming to Jersey prior to them coming, so that actually we can actually turn them away before they actually get here. So I would like to make that point, sir, and I fully accept that people aren't happy how we ended up in relation to the UK coming out of the EU, but I would also remind people that it was Jersey in the past who actually decided not to join the EU. And so I think we need to remember that fact. But as I said, it apparently, from other jurisdictions, it doesn't appear to have made a difference. But I would like to just remind people, as I said, about the strengthening of our borders. And also, as the Chief Minister said, the system will operate electronically, and there will be automatic things automatically will be issued. There will be technical things whereby it'll be further documentation will be required, and Jersey Customs and Immigration will deal with any rejections. So we will still be involved in the system. This is about the UK actually managing the system and delivering that service, and the £16 obviously will go to them. From our perspective, this is a bonus because this is not a financial implication to us. So I think that answers most of the questions that have been asked, sir.
Mr. Merrill, was there a point of clarification?
Yes, please, sir.
And they'll do all the same?
Yeah,
Yes,
sorry,
to
sir,
take
yes.
those, Minister, you prepared to take these points of clarification?
Yes, sir, sorry.
Yes, Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. It was just if the Minister could clarify that threats to Jersey can also come from the UK and not just from Europe. And so, you know, this electronic travel authorisation is only one-way facing. Could she clarify that threats to Jersey security can come from the UK too?
Absolutely, sir, and obviously we are all aware of that. But as I think it's been made quite clear in the past, we cannot control people who have British passports, but we do, as an island, can control those people who we actually want to ensure the safety of our borders. And I fully accept, sir, of what Deputy Morell is saying in relation to the fact that we can't control British citizens who may be a threat to us, but we would want to be able to control people from other parts of the world in relation to possible threats, sir. So I think I do fully accept what he's saying, and in reality, most people across the world would probably not want to have visas. They probably wouldn't want to have ETAs and other forms of travel documentation, but that is a reality of the world. But also, I do think that we need to also be mindful that we do want to ensure our security, sir. Thank you. And thank you, sir.
Deputy Wall.
Yeah, just one question, and that is, obviously at this moment in time we have manual stamping of passports going through. Does this actually make it easier? Do we have a quicker transition time through into Europe by this ETA system?
Sir, I think we've become into a question and answer system.
Yes, that's my point of clarification.
Can I be quite frank? This is about people coming in to Jersey will need an ETA, nothing else. What we need to go into France and into Europe, and the other questions that people asked me about whether we're going to be able to get the French to agree to more for us, that is for another day, sir. This is purely and simply about us having an ETA and falling in line with the rest of the CTA, which includes the UK, the Isle of Man and Guernsey, because obviously we are going to want to travel to all of those places, and we will be having to have an ETA-type system to be able to go into France, the same as if we go into the USA, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Thank you, sir. And I propose the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Do you seek the appel?
Yes, please, sir.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. announce that the proposition has been adopted. 40 votes for, 1 vote contra, and 1 abstention.
Do we have the one and the one, please?
Yes.
Deputy Morel voted contre and Deputy Jeune abstained.
The next item is the draft income support for parents, children, housing, Jersey Amendment Regulations.
So before we start, so may I propose the adjournment? So.
We never ask. Does anyone else support the adjournment now? Members content to
So
adjourn.
before we adjourn, so can I just ask the position with the residential tenancy law? Members have the law now, sir. And we've had this evening and what's left, if they haven't looked at it today. Test members, you, sir, is that something we will deal with first thing tomorrow?
Yes, there is an urgent oral question from Deputy Sallier, which we'll deal with first, and then we'll return to the residential tenancy law if members content to proceed in that way.
Thank you, sir.
So that's absolutely fine with me, and if members have any questions overnight, please feel free to contact me about any of that. Not literally overnight, the evening, I should say. Please don't call me at 2 in the morning.
Assembly is adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning.